She once sewed her own winter coat just to afford ballet shoes for her daughter. She skipped meals, worked double shifts, and sold the land her parents left her, just to make sure her little girl could go to design school in New York. But now, sitting alone in a creaky house deep in Oregon woods, 78-year-old Gertrude Klein realizes something devastating. None of it meant anything to the one person it was all for. I never needed a mansion. I never wore pearls, and I surely never paid extra for whipped cream on my coffee. What I had was my daughter, and what I gave her was, well, everything. Samantha was all I had after my husband Tom passed in '82. A logging accident, quick and cruel. I was left with a toddler, a mortgage, and a job at the public library that paid just enough to keep the lights on, most months. I remember sitting at the kitchen table at night, balancing pennies and praying over powdered milk and canned beans. Not once did I resent her. Not once did I ask, why me? Because every sacrifice felt like love. I believed that if I just gave enough, she'd never feel the holes I felt as a child. That's how I lived. One unpaid vacation, one worn-out coat, one skipped doctor visit at a time. Samantha never saw that side. And maybe that's my fault. She saw the new sketchbooks I managed to surprise her with each Christmas. She saw the art summer camps in California I somehow found a way to fund. She never knew the electricity was nearly shut off twice. She never knew I pawned my mother's sapphire ring to help with her final tuition payment. When she got her degree in interior design, I stood at the back of the graduation crowd in a pair of shoes with cracked soles and clapped until my hands ached. I remember thinking, she's going to have a life I only dreamed of. I thought I'd done right by her. In her 20s, she was sweet but distant, ambitious, busy, climbing fast in the LA design world. I didn't want to hover. I sent birthday cards, care packages with ginger cookies, the same recipe she used to beg for as a kid. The calls grew shorter, but I figured, that's just how grown kids are. By the time she turned 35, Samantha had 2 properties, an online following, and a boyfriend named Leo who wore designer scarves and called me Gertrude instead of Mom. I thought it was a phase. It wasn't. He never liked the quiet, or me. Still, I never asked for help. I lived quietly in our old log house, the one Tom and I built ourselves back in '74. I kept the garden tidy, the pantry full, and the porch painted, even when arthritis made each stair feel like a battle. All I asked, just once, was help with new insulation. The Oregon winters had gotten worse. The old heater groaned all night. Samantha said she'd look into it. That was 3 winters ago. I never pushed again. She always said I was too sentimental. You should have moved into a condo years ago, she told me once while texting. That house is like a museum. But it wasn't a museum to me. It was the only place I ever called home. The bookshelf still held Tom's mystery novels. My aprons hung behind the pantry door, and the kitchen table still had a scratch from the time Samantha dropped her math textbook too hard in 5th grade. That scratch made me smile. So did the coat hook she used to never reach. I stayed not because I was stubborn, but because I still felt her there, in pieces. What I didn't know then, what I wouldn't allow myself to see, was that love isn't always enough. That sometimes giving everything doesn't make someone grateful. It just teaches them to expect more. Now I sat with a stack of bank statements on my lap and a strange hollowness in my chest. The heater clicked. The kettle screamed in the distance, and still the house felt colder than it ever had. The worst part wasn't the money. It wasn't even the betrayal. It was the realization that my daughter saw me as someone to manage, not someone to honor, not even someone to listen to. And if you think this is a story of loud revenge, you're wrong. This is a revenge story, the quiet kind. The kind where love turns into resolve. The kind where a mother, after a lifetime of sacrifice, finally learns the hardest lesson of all, that dignity sometimes means walking away and meaning it. It started with a clipboard. Samantha arrived one weekend unannounced, all high heels and fast words. "Mom, I've been thinking," she said, dropping her designer tote on the couch like she still lived there. You shouldn't be worrying about bills and banking at your age. It's dangerous, Mom. There are scams, identity theft. Do you even use two-factor authentication? I was halfway through peeling apples for a pie. She pulled out documents, power of attorney, account transfers, beneficiary updates. She spoke fast, as if efficiency could cover the discomfort. It's not that I don't trust you. It's just, I can help. It's easier this way. Easier for who? I didn't ask, because in that moment, I didn't feel like her mother. I felt like a liability. She placed the pen in my hand before I could even finish processing what power of attorney really meant. Just sign here and here. I already filled most of it out. I hesitated. And this means you'll help with the heating, right? The insulation? Of course. She smiled, but her eyes didn't. I signed. That was the last warm moment between us. Weeks passed. The promised heater never came. I received a monthly transfer of $400, less than I'd get from Social Security if I'd applied for early retirement. When I asked about it, she said the market had taken a dip and that I should be conservative. A woman who once worked double shifts so her daughter could attend art camp was now being told to cut back on soup and tea. She stopped calling altogether. I called her once and got Leo. He said, Sam's in Portugal, brand partnership. She'll text you when she can. She never did. I started boiling rainwater on the stove when the pipes froze, wore double sweaters inside. The insulation crumbled from the attic like dry snow, and still, I waited. Until one night, curiosity got the better of me. I logged into the bank account, the one that used to be mine, and nearly fell over. Tens of thousands, gone. Spent in transfers, travel expenses, business charges. My savings had wings, and those wings had flown far from this forest and into oceans I'd never see. I confronted her via email, carefully typed. Her reply came 12 hours later. Mom, let's not be dramatic. I'm doing this for both of us. You don't need to worry about the numbers. I'm taking care of everything. Taking care? Like I was a dying plant in the corner of some apartment. I wanted to scream. Instead, I made a cup of chamomile and stared at the blank television screen, wondering how many other mothers sat in silence like this, biting back words that would only echo in an empty room. And now I need to ask, have you ever trusted someone so deeply that when they finally turned their back, it felt like your chest caved in? I'm serious. Have you ever been betrayed not with cruelty, but with calm, condescending control? Tell me in the comments if you've ever handed someone your heart, only for them to manage it like a budget. They say the worst betrayal isn't loud. It's subtle. It's clean. It's when love gets repackaged as protection and trust becomes a tool. Samantha called once more after that. She was in Dubai. I bought you some organic facial cream, Mom. It's anti-aging. You'll love it. I was standing next to a cracked window, hands red from scrubbing the floor because the sink had leaked again. I didn't respond. You there? I'm here, I said. I'll send it next week. I hung up before she finished the sentence. That night, I went to the attic, found the scrapbook I kept from when she was little, photos of her in her ballet outfit, birthday cards she made with crayon hearts, a note she once wrote that said, "When I grow up, I'll buy you a big, warm house." I pressed that note to my chest and cried until the tears soaked through the paper. Not because of the money, not because of the cold, but because I finally understood that the girl in those photos was gone. She didn't disappear overnight. She evolved into someone the world applauded, into someone sleek, polished, successful. But she left her gratitude behind like a childhood blanket, forgotten, folded up, no longer needed. So I sat there, alone, in a house that used to be ours, and thought, how much does it cost to raise a child who forgets you? No number came to mind. I wish I could tell you that it all changed after I confronted her, that she apologized, came to her senses, and remembered the mother who held her hand through fevers, heartbreaks, and every school recital. But no. After the money vanished and the silence settled in, something colder took its place. Indifference. She didn't call on my birthday, not even a text. No card, no flowers, no digital confetti from some app she probably used for her clients. Just nothing. I sat in the living room with a slice of lemon cake I bought myself. The candle wouldn't stay lit because the window frame had warped again, letting the wind sneak through. I tried to light it 3 times. Finally, I gave up. You don't blow out candles when there's no one watching. It feels performative, like clapping after a solo no one asked for. A week later, I found out through a photo. My neighbor's niece showed me a post on Instagram, Samantha smiling in capri, arms around Leo holding champagne on a yacht. The caption read, "Designing my dream life, summer reset had blessed." In the corner of the photo was a black Louis Vuitton bag. I recognized it. It used to be mine. Tom gave it to me on our 20th wedding anniversary. I'd only used it a few times. I kept it in the original dust bag up in the closet behind the quilts. I guess she'd taken it during her last visit. I hadn't even noticed. Suddenly, I couldn't breathe. It wasn't the bag. Not really. It was the erasure. The way my life, my love, my sacrifices had been repurposed into props for hers. I turned off the phone, thanked the girl, and sat on the porch swing for what felt like hours. Not swinging, just existing. The next morning, I went to the bank in town. My account had less than $5,000. Most of the large withdrawals had been marked consulting expenses or investment prep. She'd signed everything. She had legal access. I had nothing. When I asked the bank manager if there was anything I could do, he gave me a sympathetic look, the kind people give lost children or old women in line too long at the post office. He said gently, "You signed over full authority, ma'am." Ma'am, not Mrs. Klein, not Gertrude. Just a cold, polite ma'am, as if I were a stranger to my own life. I walked home slowly, heels crunching on gravel, shoulders trembling. That was the moment something in me folded inwards. The heat had stopped working again. The house groaned with cold. I filled the kettle, stood by the sink, and stared out the window at the frost lining the old rose bushes. There was a robin on the fence. It looked right at me, head tilted, and for one insane moment I whispered, "She took everything." Because I needed to say it out loud. I needed the world, even the birds, to know that I hadn't just lost money. I had lost my daughter, not to death. That would have been grief, but to greed, which is lonelier. And the loneliest thing of all, there was no trace of me in her life. No framed photo in her apartment. No stories of childhood I'd heard her share with friends. No acknowledgement, like I had been scrubbed from her memory with the same polish she used on her brand. And still, I didn't tell anyone. I didn't call neighbors. I didn't go to the church to ask for help. Because pride is funny like that. You can lose everything and still cling to your dignity like it's the last thread on a torn coat. That night, I lit a fire with old newspapers. One headline caught my eye before it burned. "Families drift apart in modern America." No kidding. In the dim orange light, I opened my sewing basket. Inside was a half-knitted scarf I'd started for her last Christmas. She'd said scarves were out of style, so I never finished it. I picked up the needles anyway, not to finish the scarf, but because I needed to feel like I could still make something that stayed mine. It happened on a Tuesday. There was nothing particularly dramatic about it. No thunderclap, no glass shattering, just a quiet thud in the hallway and the sting of cold tile against my back. I had slipped in the bathroom, reaching for a towel on the upper rack. One moment I was upright. The next I was staring at the popcorn ceiling, winded, half-drenched, and too humiliated to cry. I waited. For what? I wasn't sure. Maybe I thought Samantha would somehow sense it. Maybe some mother-daughter intuition would wake her in whatever spa bed she was napping in. But the only thing that arrived was silence. The heater buzzed in the background, faint and useless. When I finally dragged myself upright using the doorknob, I felt something deep in my chest shift. Not a rib, not a bone. Something older. Something that had been holding me together for too long. The next day, Harper came by. She was a college volunteer from the local library, no older than 23. She'd started dropping off donated books once a month and sometimes stayed for tea. She always asked if she could help with anything. I always said no, but that day, I didn't. She found me in the kitchen, knees still stiff from the fall, holding a mug of water I hadn't boiled yet. I must have looked as fragile as I felt, because she dropped her bag and rushed over. "Are you okay?" she asked, gently touching my elbow. Her concern was so pure it startled me. I nodded, then shook my head, then said, "I don't think I am." I didn't mean for the words to come out, but once they did, I couldn't stop them. I told her about the money, the documents, the messages that never came, about the insulation that never arrived, about Samantha. Harper didn't gasp or look shocked. She just listened, like really listened. At one point she whispered, "I'm so sorry, Miss Klein. That's not how mothers deserve to be treated." That line, it cracked something wide open inside me. Because no one had said that to me before. Not the bank, not the neighbors, not even myself. Not once had I said, "I deserve better." I had spent so long convincing myself that this was love in a new form, efficiency, delegation, management, that Samantha was just overwhelmed or busy or trying her best, that her distance was maturity, that her coldness was modernity. But Harper's words cut through all that noise like a knife. I went to bed that night and stared at the ceiling. And for the first time in years, I didn't see memories dancing in the corners of my mind. I saw facts. Fact, I had given my daughter everything. Fact, she had taken what she needed and left. Fact, I was not waiting anymore. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was something else. Clear. The next morning, I dug out the box with all my legal papers. I sat at the table for hours, reading slowly, highlighting sections. I made a list of questions. I circled phone numbers. I didn't rush. I wasn't in a hurry. When Samantha first took control, I thought I was protecting myself by letting go. But I'd only handed her the key to erase me, and she hadn't even looked back when she locked the door. But now I was the one turning the knob. I made an appointment with a local elder law attorney, a kind woman named Denise. She didn't talk down to me, didn't act surprised. She'd seen this before, too many times. "You're not alone," she said, matter-of-factly. "It's more common than people think." She walked me through the steps, revoking power of attorney, reclaiming access, redrafting my will. As she slid a stack of fresh documents toward me, she asked, "Do you know what you want to do with the estate?" I hesitated. Then I thought of Harper, the only person in the last 2 years who had spoken to me like I mattered. Not as a task or a tax burden or a line item in someone else's plan. "I do," I said. I didn't say Samantha's name once during that meeting. That night I made soup, the real kind, with fresh thyme and carrots and barley, not the microwave stuff I'd been surviving on. I played a vinyl record I hadn't touched since Tom died. I opened the windows even though it was cold. I let the wind in, because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for my daughter to knock. I was waiting for myself to come back, and I could hear her now, in the way the floor creaked under my steps, in the way the spoon clinked against the pot, in the way I caught my reflection in the window and didn't look away. I didn't tell anyone I changed the will. Not Harper, not the attorney, not even the mailman, who always handed me the envelope like I was made of glass. It wasn't a secret. It was just mine. After months of being a footnote in someone else's plan, I finally had something that belonged only to me again. The legal documents sat neatly in a locked drawer in the back bedroom, behind a faded quilt my grandmother stitched the year I was born. I didn't frame them or celebrate with wine. I didn't whisper Samantha's name or imagine her reaction. That wasn't the point. I wasn't punishing her. I was protecting what was left of me. I started small. I sold a few antiques I never liked, listed them online, and shipped them out in reused Amazon boxes. Then I rented the garage to a woodworker from town, a young dad named Mitch, who always brought his kid along on Saturdays. The sound of hammers and laughter filtered through the walls like some old song I'd forgotten the words to. With the extra money, I had the attic insulated, then the windows sealed, then, finally, the heater replaced. Quietly, piece by piece, the house started to breathe again. So did I. I let go of the old expectations, that Samantha would call, that she'd wake up one morning in a rush of guilt, fly in, wrap her arms around me and say, "Oh, I'm sorry." No, that fantasy had expired, and I refused to renew it. Instead, I started going for short walks. Just to the mailbox at first, then around the block, then to the edge of the trail that ran behind the church. I brought a thermos of tea and sat on a wooden bench near the maple trees. Sometimes I'd see Harper jogging or Mitch pushing his daughter on a bike. They'd wave. I'd wave back. It wasn't much, but it was mine. One day I went into town and bought yarn, real yarn, not the dusty stuff I'd been hoarding in plastic tubs. This was bright and soft and smelled faintly of lavender. I knit scarves again, not for anyone, not for a birthday, not out of obligation, just because my hands remembered how to make something warm. I donated most of them to the church shelter, quietly, anonymously. It made me feel human again. There's something sacred about doing good when no one's watching, about rebuilding not out of spite, but out of survival. And bit by bit, the house stopped feeling like a mausoleum. It started feeling like mine again. I cleared out Samantha's old room, not out of bitterness, but because I needed the space. I turned it into a reading room, painted the walls a pale green, hung shelves, lined them with books I hadn't opened in decades, lit candles, let the scent of cedar and paper and soft light fill the air. I would sit there for hours, a mug of tea in hand, and read, not waiting, not hoping, just being. One morning I heard birdsong outside my window, same robin, same fence. But this time I didn't whisper sorrow to it, I just smiled. That day I made a choice. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet one. I called Denise, the attorney, and told her I wanted to finalize the changes. She asked again, "Are you sure you want to leave everything to Harper?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes," I said. "She's never asked for anything, and still she showed up." Denise made a soft sound. "You're not the only one, you know." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I think I'm finally okay not being someone's mother first. When I hung up, I didn't cry. I made soup again. Lentils this time. I played a Billie Holiday record. I folded laundry, watered the ivy plant by the window, and when the sun dipped below the tree line, I lit the lamp by the reading chair and kept knitting. Not because anyone needed a scarf, but because I was warm enough to give again, on my terms. The first card came in early spring, a plain white envelope, no return address. Inside was a photo of Samantha on stage somewhere in Europe, accepting an award for her work in sustainable luxury design. She was holding a plaque, smiling wide, draped in a tailored silk jumpsuit that probably cost more than my car. Tucked inside was a single sticky note. "Thought you'd be proud, S." I stared at it for a long time, not angry, not impressed, just quiet. Proud, maybe once. Before I realized her success had been built on a foundation she never planned to acknowledge. I didn't write back. Weeks passed. The magnolias bloomed outside my window, the same ones Tom planted when we bought the house. I spent my mornings with a new rhythm, coffee, porch swing, knitting. The phone rang less and less, but the silence no longer felt hollow. It felt earned. Then came the knock on the door. I almost didn't answer it, but I opened it, and there she was, Samantha. Her face was thinner, sharper somehow. She held her phone in one hand, a small designer purse in the other. No suitcase, no flowers, just her. "Hi, Mom," I blinked. "You flew here?" She gave a weak smile. "I had a layover in Portland, thought I'd stop by." I stepped aside. "You're here now." She sat at the edge of the couch like it might bite her. For a few minutes, we said nothing. Then she blurted, "I heard from Denise." I didn't look surprised. I had expected it, eventually. "She said you changed the will." "I did," I said calmly. Samantha's face barely moved. "You left everything to a library volunteer?" I smiled softly. "Her name's Harper, and yes, I did." Samantha looked down. Her voice cracked for the first time. "You're punishing me." "No," I said. "I'm finally protecting myself." Silence stretched between us like an old bridge, creaking, sagging. "I thought I was helping," she whispered. "I thought you needed someone to manage things." I nodded. Maybe I did, but what I needed more was a daughter. She didn't argue. She just sat there, eyes glassy. And then, for just a second, I saw it. Not regret, not sadness, recognition, not loud, not tearful, but real. She stood up after that, said she had a car waiting, didn't hug me, just nodded and walked out the door. I didn't follow. I just stood there, hand resting on the doorframe, heart steady. I had waited so many years for her to see me. And maybe, just maybe, that day she did. But I wasn't living for that anymore. And now I want to ask you something. Have you ever let go? Not out of anger, but for peace. Have you ever realized that walking away quietly was louder than any shout you could ever make? If you have, tell me below. Because sometimes the strongest revenge story isn't revenge at all. It's dignity. It's peace. It's freedom. That evening, Harper stopped by with a basket of garden vegetables and a loaf of cinnamon bread. "Thought you could use a treat," she said, laughing. She didn't ask about the fancy car that had pulled out earlier. She just sat with me in the reading room, the spring light pouring in through the window, dust dancing like memories. She asked if I wanted to start a community knitting group. I said yes. We didn't talk about money, or inheritance, or daughters who forgot birthdays. We talked about tomatoes and yarn, and how to make soup from scratch. I watched her laugh at something I said and thought, this is what legacy looks like, not in blood, but in care, in kindness returned without expectation, in the quiet assurance that despite everything, I hadn't disappeared. After Samantha left, the house didn't feel emptier. If anything, it felt clearer, like someone had finally wiped a fogged mirror and let me see things for what they were. I didn't cry that night. I didn't make tea. I didn't stare out the window hoping her car would turn around. I folded the blanket on the couch, turned off the porch light, and went to bed with a kind of stillness I hadn't felt in years. The next morning, I didn't check my phone for a message that never came. Instead, I wrote a grocery list. There was something oddly comforting about the ordinary things, the way the pen scratched on paper, the small decision of whether to buy sweet potatoes or russets. I chose sweet. I walked to the farmer's market. It had been ages since I'd gone. Not because I couldn't, but because somewhere along the way, I had told myself it was pointless to enjoy things if I had no one to share them with. But that morning, I shared them with myself. I bought tulips, yellow ones. I smiled at the old man selling honey and let him talk about his bees. I tried a bite of peach jam and bought a jar even though it was too expensive. I didn't care. I came home, opened the windows, and let the scent of something new drift through the rooms. That evening, Harper stopped by with a recipe for lentil stew. She talked about her sister, a messy move, a new job. I listened, nodded, and didn't once feel like I was being used or managed. We cooked together. She peeled, I stirred, and then, as the pot bubbled, she said, "You know, I used to be scared of becoming my mother." I looked at her. "And now? I think I'm finally learning to become myself." I smiled. "That's the trick, isn't it?" She didn't know what I meant, but that was okay. After she left, I sat in the reading room, the one that used to be Samantha's, and took down a book I hadn't touched since 1984. The pages smelled like dust and memory. I read 2 chapters before dozing off in the chair, warm under the yellow light, and that's how it went, day by day. No big declaration, no epiphany, just living. I started volunteering at the library with Harper on Thursdays. I brought cookies once. The kids who came in for reading hour called me Miss G. One of them drew me a picture of a cat with glasses and gave it to me with jelly on her fingers. It now hangs on my fridge. I kept knitting scarves. One day, I made a blanket, then another, then a dozen. I gave them away, left them in church pews, tucked them into donation boxes at the community center. No name, no note, just warmth. One Sunday morning, the church pastor pulled me aside. "I've never seen so many people smile over something so simple," he said. "It's not simple to be warm," I replied. He nodded, and we didn't need to say anything more. That night, I sat in the garden, wrapped in one of my own blankets, sipping chamomile, watching the stars come out one by one. I wasn't thinking about Samantha. Not with pain, not even with distance. She had her life, and I finally had mine. It had been 4 months since I changed my will. 4 months of peace, of small routines and warm meals, of not waiting. So when I opened the mailbox and saw the envelope with Samantha's handwriting, I didn't flinch. There was no return address, just a folded letter. 3 lines. "I'm sorry, I need help, please call." I sat on the porch steps, letter in hand, the tulips beside me starting to bend in the summer heat. I read the words again. They weren't dramatic. They weren't manipulative. They were sparse. But they were hers. That night, I didn't sleep much, not out of confusion, but because something inside me was oddly calm. Years ago, a letter like that would have sent me into a panic. I would have packed soup, found a flight, rehearsed a speech, or prayed she still liked chamomile. But now, I just kept asking myself a single question. If I help her, do I lose myself again? The next morning, I called Harper. I told her everything. She didn't rush to advise me. She just listened, the same way she always had. Finally, she said, "What does your heart say?" I chuckled. My heart says I've already helped her more than I ever helped myself. There was a long pause. Then she said, "Maybe this time you can help her without erasing yourself." That stuck with me. So I did call Samantha. Her voice cracked when she answered. I heard noise in the background, voices, maybe an airport, maybe a hospital. I couldn't tell. She didn't tell me what had happened right away. She didn't cry. She just said, "I need you." 3 words I hadn't heard since she was 9 years old and stuck her hand through the fence chasing a kite. I didn't say, "You've needed me for years." I didn't say, "Now you remember I exist." I didn't even say, "Why now?" I just listened. That's what mothers do. That's what people do. She was stuck in Europe. A business partner had pulled out. There were legal issues. She didn't need money. She needed someone to talk to. Someone she didn't have to impress, someone who wouldn't try to fix everything, just someone steady. And I could do that, but on my terms. "I'll stay on the line," I told her, "but I'm not flying anywhere and I'm not fixing it." There was a long silence, then quietly she whispered, "I understand." And in that moment, I realized something that caught me off guard. She didn't sound like a daughter reaching for her mother. She sounded like a woman, uncertain, lost, asking another woman to hold space for her, not rescue her. That difference mattered. I hung up with no promises, no pledges, just presence. The next week, she called twice, not for help, just to talk. She told me about the silence in her apartment, how the things she used to chase didn't fill it anymore, how the nights stretched longer than she liked. I didn't tell her that I had known that silence for years. I just let her find her way through it. One afternoon, she asked what I'd been doing lately. I told her about Harper, the kids at the library, the knitted blankets, the farmer's market honey, the tomato vines growing on the back fence. And I heard something new in her voice, not jealousy, not guilt, wonder, like she was starting to realize I had a life, a real one that didn't orbit hers. "Maybe I could visit soon?" she asked. I paused. Not because I didn't want her to, but because I finally knew the visit wouldn't define me. "You're welcome, Anna," I said. "But not because you need saving, because I have tea and chairs and maybe a little space for you if you bring peach jam." She laughed. Real laughter. Unpolished, not posed. And in that sound, something healed between us. Not completely, not loudly, but enough. Samantha arrived with just one suitcase. No grand entrance, no drama. Just a knock on the door and that familiar look. Half guarded, half hopeful. I opened the door, stepped aside and said, "You're early." She gave a small smile. Flight landed ahead of schedule. I noticed she wasn't wearing any jewelry. No designer coat, no heels, just sneakers and a cardigan that looked like it belonged to someone who had finally stopped performing. We sat at the kitchen table, drinking chamomile tea in silence, the kind of silence that wasn't uncomfortable, just real. After a while, she said, I thought I'd feel strange being here again, but I don't. I feel safe. I didn't answer. I just slid a plate of cookies toward her. Later that evening, she followed me into the garden. The tomato vines were thick now, leaning heavy under their own growth. I handed her the small shears. "Cut the ones with the deepest color," I said. She hesitated, then started trimming carefully. "I never realized how quiet it is here," she whispered. "It used to annoy me." I chuckled. "Quiet makes you hear yourself." She didn't argue, just kept picking. That night, she took the guest room. I didn't tuck her in, I didn't kiss her forehead. I simply handed her a folded towel and said, "There's lavender soap in the cabinet." She paused at the door. "Thank you for letting me come." I nodded. "Just remember, you're visiting. This is my home." She understood. The next morning, I found her in the reading room, not scrolling her phone, not pacing, just sitting. A book open in her lap. She looked up and smiled. "This used to be my room," she said. I nodded. "Now it's mine." She didn't look wounded by that. She looked respectful. Later, while chopping carrots, she asked, "Do you really knit all those blankets?" I shrugged. "It keeps my hands busy." "I saw one at the shelter last year," she said softly. "Didn't know it was yours. You weren't supposed to." She didn't press further, just kept peeling. That night, she asked if she could come with me to the library on Thursday. I raised an eyebrow. "You want to help read to the kids?" She laughed. "Maybe just shelve books." And so she did. She stood beside me at the library, stacking picture books in alphabetical order, while Harper waved from across the room. The kids ran circles around us, sticky fingers and big eyes, shouting about dinosaurs and dragons. I watched Samantha take it in, not with pity or pride, just quiet observation. "I used to think success was louder than this," she said on the drive home, but I was wrong. Back at the house, she cooked dinner, grilled cheese and tomato soup, basic, comforting, like something I would have made for her when she was 7 and sick with the flu. We didn't talk much during dinner, just the sound of spoons tapping bowls and ice clinking in glasses. But as she cleared the table, she turned to me and said, "I've been thinking about the will." I set down my napkin. "Have you?" She nodded. "You were right to change it." I blinked. "I don't think I earned any of what you gave me before," she continued. "I was so focused on owning everything, I forgot to honor where it came from. That landed hard, but in a good way." She looked at me, this time without any of the practiced charm or control. Just my daughter, tired, a little worn, but real. "I'm not asking for anything," she said. "I just want to be someone who's worthy of being remembered, whether I inherit anything or not." And for the first time, I didn't feel like I needed to protect her from her own ego. I just felt proud. Not because she'd finally come around, but because she got there without me dragging her. That night, as I watered the ivy plant, I looked at my reflection in the kitchen window and saw a woman who had kept going, even when everything she gave had been taken for granted. And somehow, she got it all back, quietly. And maybe you felt that too. Have you ever watched someone finally see what they never noticed about you before? Not because you shouted, not because you demanded, but because you simply kept living. If that's happened to you, even once, drop a comment. Let's remind each other that quiet growth is still growth, and sometimes it's the only kind that lasts. The knock on the door came late one afternoon, a sharp rap that sliced through the soft hum of my new life. I was in the reading room, perched on the old armchair with a cup of mint tea, cataloging library books on my laptop. Sunlight filtered through the lace curtains, dust motes dancing like quiet applause. I set the mug down, closed the laptop, and walked to the front hall. The door swung open to reveal Samantha, clutching a bulging envelope in one hand and her phone in the other. Her posture was hesitant, shoulders slightly hunched, eyes searching mine as if she weren't sure I'd answer at all. "Mom," she began, voice taped together with nerves and relief, "we need to talk." I gestured her inside. "Come in." She stepped over the threshold, clutching the envelope like it contained everything she'd ever believed. I closed the door and turned the knob with deliberately slow movements, as if sealing away the past. She swallowed. "I got your letter." I raised an eyebrow. My letter? She nodded, pulling the sticky note from its envelope. It was the same 3 lines she sent months ago. I'm sorry, I need help. Please call. I wrote back, I said softly. But you weren't the only one receiving letters lately. Her brow furrowed. The envelope in her hand trembled. You changed your will. You sold the house. I nodded. I did. To Harper. Her lip quivered. Why her? Why didn't you come to me? I considered my answer. In the months since she first called, I'd learned that sometimes love is measured not by who you give to, but by who you choose to keep. Because she was there, I said. Every time you weren't. Every time you were too busy to even text. She glanced around the entryway, the framed children's drawings, the small shelf of library books, the lavender sachets hanging by the door. It's different. This is my home, I replied. The one I always thought would stay mine. I stepped aside, motioning to the hall. But it's yours to remember or not. Your choice. Samantha's eyes glistened, brimming with unshed tears. She took a hesitant step forward, then another. Mom, you've always been there for me, even when I didn't deserve it. I folded my hands over each other. I'm not here to collect apologies, she nodded, swallowing. I need your help. I messed up, and I don't know what to do next. I studied her. For so long, her requests were demands. Now it sounded like fear, a different fear than mine, the one that came from genuine vulnerability, not entitlement. I held out a hand as sit down, let's talk. She sank into the guest chair, envelope clutched to her chest. I returned to the table, pouring fresh mint tea into her cup. Steam curled upward, carrying the scent of calm. We talked for a while. Her troubles overseas, the legal entanglements, the timelines she'd ignored, the doors she'd shut too hard. She apologized again, voice cracking, and somewhere between sips of tea and bites of lemon cake I'd baked that morning, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Absence had shrunk the rage to something manageable. Disappointment had softened, and what remained was an unexpected space for compassion. When she paused, I asked, "What helped you decide to come here?" She looked down at her hands. I realized I'd built my life on things I thought would prove my worth. Awards, contracts, Instagram likes, none of it filled the spaces I'd left empty inside. Her words echoed something I understood well. Sometimes the biggest successes blind us to what we lose along the way. She lifted her gaze. I lost you. I nodded. I stopped waiting. Silence fell, comfortable now. The house groaned with settling beams. The wind rustled through the maple trees outside, and for the first time it felt like a truce, not between us, but within me. After a moment, Samantha reached into the envelope and pulled out a keychain. It was a simple brass key tied with a faded ribbon. I think this is yours, she whispered, holding out the ribbon end. It was in the glove box of my rental car. I recognized it at once. Tom's old farmhouse key, the one he carried in his pocket every summer so that if I locked myself out, I could let myself back in. I hadn't seen it in decades. I took the ribbon, unwrapped it, and held the key in my palm. It felt heavy with memory, but also light with possibility. Thank you, I said, surprised at how natural it felt. Samantha's shoulders slumped. She wiped a tear. I don't expect you to take me back. Her voice trembled. I wanted to give you that. I placed the key on the table. You already did. She searched my face for judgment. I offered none. That key is proof of the summers we had, not proof that you owed me anything, just a reminder you're welcome. Sometimes that's enough. She nodded, tears slipping free now. I gave her a soft smile, part mother, part someone who had found her own way, unburdened by neediness. I'm staying the night, she said, voice small. I gestured to the guest room. Of course. That evening, we sat on the porch swing, watching the sun dip behind the hills. Crickets began their song. Fireflies flickered. Samantha leaned her head on my shoulder, hesitating like she might bolt if I moved. But I stayed still. You know, she said, I never thought I'd say this, but I'm proud of you. I closed my eyes and let the words settle. It wasn't the loud applause I once craved. It was an honest statement, issued in a place of safety. When the stars came out, I stood and fetched 2 blankets. We wrapped ourselves, and she asked, "Can we just sit like this a bit longer?" I nodded, holding the edge of the swing, and so we sat. No need to fix the past, no promises hammered down, just 2 women sharing the sky. Before the night ended, Samantha handed me a small notebook. On the cover, in her handwriting, "A place for us." Inside were empty pages. "Start our story here," she whispered. "Yours, mine, ours." I accepted it, fingertips brushing hers. "We'll see where it takes us." And with that, I realized the final twist of this quiet revenge story wasn't about punishment. It was about opening the door, on my terms, inviting connection back in, but only at a pace that honored my own rebirth. I never planned to be someone's hero. I simply needed a place to belong. So when Harper called and said the children's literacy program needed volunteers, I offered without thinking twice. My new apartment was small, a cozy 1-bedroom with a balcony overlooking the library's courtyard. Boxes of books lined the shelves, and a single armchair sat in the corner. It was home, but it felt empty without purpose. Teaching reading felt like filling that empty space with something that mattered again. On my first morning at the library, I arrived early to set up. The children's wing was quiet, bathed in soft morning light. Tiny chairs and low tables stood ready, and colorful posters of the alphabet lined the walls. I arranged picture books across the table, frogs that hopped, bears in pajamas, and a simple story about a lost kitten finding its way home. I didn't know what to expect. Would they laugh at my accent? Would they be too shy to speak? My heart tapped behind my ribs like a nervous drummer. When the first child arrived, she tiptoed in, clutching a worn backpack. Her name was Lucy, 8 years old, with curls that refused to stay in barrettes. She peeked around the corner, eyes wide, then marched forward and sat at the table. I offered her a book about a brave mouse. She took it, looked back at me, then opened it with care. One by one, the other children followed. A quiet boy named Marco, a twin pair named Jasmine and Jaden, and 2 sisters who whispered secrets to each other in giggles. They settled in like petals in a puddle, cautious but curious. As we read together, I encouraged them to sound out words, celebrate small victories, and ask questions. "What's happening on this page?" I would ask. Lucy raised her hand and said, "The mouse is lost, but he's brave." I smiled and nodded, relishing that moment. Then the unthinkable happened. Lucy looked up at me and said, in a tiny voice that felt like a spotlight, "I like you, Ms. Klein. You're like a grandma I never had." My throat tightened. A lump rose in my chest. I realized her words weren't empty praise. They were a gift wrapped in innocence. Lucy's confession broke something open inside me. My first instinct was to shake my head and deny it. I wasn't a grandmother. I'd never held that title except in quiet fantasies. But her sincere, shining eyes held no judgment, only gratitude. "Thank you, Lucy," I whispered. "That means more than I can say." She beamed, turning to the next page as if realizing she'd given me a treasure. The other children watched, and a hush settled over the room. In that moment, I was seen, not as a volunteer, or the woman who sold her house, or the one whose daughter betrayed her, but simply as someone capable of kindness. After class, Marco tugged at my sweater. "Miss G," he said, "can you help me with the letter E? Every time I say elephant, I mess it up." I knelt beside him and gently guided his tongue around the E sound. He tried again, and this time it came out perfect. His face lit up, and he gave me a high five so enthusiastic I nearly tiptoed backward. Jasmine and Jaden giggled and volunteered for the next sound. I realized I felt more alive helping them than I ever did chasing achievements or worrying about lost fortunes. Over the next few weeks, more children joined. The program grew, not because of any grand announcement, but because word spread. "Ms. Klein is nice. She reads good books." I overheard a librarian mention that my sessions felt like home. That compliment sank in deeper than any prestigious "thank you" Samantha ever offered. No plaques, no trophies, just a simple acknowledgement that my presence made a difference. One afternoon, Harper stopped by during class. She stood at the doorway, arms folded, observing quietly. After the children left, she approached me. "You've changed this place," she said softly. "They look forward to Tuesdays because of you." I shrugged. "I'm just doing what I can." She smiled knowingly. Sometimes what we can do is exactly what someone needs. We shared a quiet laugh, the kind that doesn't require punchlines, just mutual understanding. That evening, after tutoring, I walked home with a bag of apples and a head full of small voices. I paused on my balcony and looked down at the courtyard where fairy lights twinkled in planters. A few children waved from below, Lucy, Marco, even Jasmine and Jaden whispering, "Good night, Miss Klein." My heart swelled. They didn't know the full story of my past, and they didn't need to. To them, I wasn't a cautionary tale or a revenge story. I was simply someone who believed in them. Sometimes I wondered, how many times had I longed to hear something like that from Samantha? But I let that thought slip away. This was my life now. Quiet, anchored in community, and brimming with unspoken gratitude. A week later, I found a stack of thank you notes on my desk in the children's section. Each was decorated with scribbles and stickers, a rainbow from Jasmine, a superhero doodle from Jaden, a carefully drawn elephant from Marco, and an entire page of tiny hearts from Lucy. At the top of each page, in uneven letters, it read, "Thank you for teaching me to read." I held the stack to my chest and closed my eyes, feeling tears slip down my cheeks. They weren't tears of sadness or regret. They were tears of relief. Relief that I had found a place where my contributions, however small, were recognized and cherished. It was the silent tribute I never asked for and didn't have to earn by money or obligation. That night, I placed each note in a folder labeled Memories. I didn't arrange them by date or alphabetize them. I just tucked them between the pages of a scrapbook I'd started long ago. It was the same scrapbook that held childhood photos of Samantha and me. Now it held new pages, pages filled with children who saw me, who valued me. As I closed the book, I realized something profound. Healing isn't always about reconciliation with the past. Sometimes it's about forging a new path where recognition comes from strangers whose lives you've touched. It's about building a legacy, not tied to blood, but to kindness. I sat at the edge of my bed, looking at the framed sketches on my nightstand, a drawing of Lucy and me reading under a tree, Marco's cartoon elephant, Jasmine's rainbow, Jaden's superhero. I traced them with my fingers, smiling softly. I didn't need anyone else's approval anymore. Before drifting to sleep, I whispered to the empty room, "Thank you. Thank you for letting me find this place. Thank you for giving me a reason to keep going. Thank you for proving that sometimes the quietest moments carry the loudest truth." And with that unspoken acknowledgement, I finally felt whole. The morning of the community celebration began like any other. I stepped out onto my balcony, the air crisp with autumn's first chill, and watched the golden leaves tumble like confetti down into the courtyard. Today, though, this modest apartment, once a place of loneliness, would host something I never imagined, a small ceremony honoring my work with the children's literacy program. When I arrived at the library, the front doors were flanked with pumpkins and corn stalks, and a simple banner read, "Celebrating Our Volunteers." I clutched my cane in one hand and carried a small bouquet of sunflowers in the other, a gift from Marco's mother, she'd said, to brighten up the reading corner. My heart fluttered like an eager page-turner. Inside, tables were set with punch bowls, cookies in autumn shapes, and stacks of thank you notes, handwritten cards from the kids I'd taught. While I'd seen some of their notes before, this was the first time I'd seen them all displayed together, like a patchwork quilt of gratitude. The room filled quickly. Parents, librarians, a few city council members, and of course Harper with her bright smile. Children hovered at the edges, eyes shining, wearing the knitted scarves and blankets I'd given them. The librarian for the children's wing, Ms. Lopez, greeted me at the podium. After welcoming everyone, Ms. Lopez said, "Today, we honor someone whose kindness has woven our community together. Someone who came here seeking nothing and gave us everything." I sank into a folding chair in the front row, the applause washing over me like the embrace I'd always longed for but seldom claimed. I looked at the faces, the proud parents, the smiling kids, Harper standing a little behind me, beaming, and felt my chest tighten. Harper stepped forward carrying a simple wooden plaque engraved with my name. She cleared her throat and said, "Gertrude Klein is not just a volunteer. She's proof that one person's compassion can reshape a whole neighborhood." She didn't seek praise. She didn't demand attention. She simply showed up day after day, book after book, blanket after blanket. She held up the plaque. "This is our tribute to her, a silent tribute for someone who taught us all that the quietest people often make the brightest difference." As she spoke, I watched the children nod. Lucy, Marco, Jasmine, Jaden. They sat cross-legged on the floor, hands folded in laps, their eyes wide. When Ms. Lopez announced that the children would each read a short tribute, the room hushed. First came Lucy. She stepped forward, voice trembling with excitement. "Ms. Klein, you helped me find my voice in stories. You taught me how to be brave." She handed me a pressed flower, one of her favorites. I tucked it into my lapel, tears pricking my eyes. Marco followed, clutching a drawing of an elephant and saying, "You showed me that big words don't have to be scary." Then Jasmine and Jaden each presented handmade bookmarks. Their shy smiles warmed me more than any spotlight ever could. When the kids returned to their parents, Ms. Lopez invited me to say a few words if I wished. I stood, legs shaking slightly, but my voice was steady. "I'm humbled," I began, glancing at the children. "I never set out to be a hero. I just wanted to help in any way I could." I paused, looking at the plaque in Harper's hands. "But you've shown me that kindness matters, that listening is powerful, that every word we share can change a life." I folded my hands over the cane and felt the weight of the moment. "Thank you for letting me be part of your stories. I'll carry this honor quietly, but I'll carry it always." A gentle applause rose again. I stepped down and Ms. Lopez guided me back to my seat. My eyes met Harper's and she mouthed, "We love you." I nodded, the tears I'd held back finally spilling down my cheeks. Later, in the library foyer, parents and children gathered for photos. One by one, people shook my hand, told me what books had become their favorites, or how their child had become more confident. A council member handed me a pin shaped like an open book, saying, "Wear this proudly. It's the city's seal of gratitude." I pinned it onto my cardigan, feeling an unfamiliar warmth. The warmth of being seen not as a footnote, but as someone truly valued. As the event wound down, Harper slipped an arm around my shoulders. "Are you proud?" she asked quietly. I looked around at the emptying rooms, the fallen confetti of leaves outside, and thought of Samantha, how she never showed up today, but had, in her own small way, helped set this in motion. I smiled at Harper, more than I ever expected, but mostly, I'm thankful. On my walk home, I carried the plaque and bouquet like treasures. I paused on the sidewalk, turned to look back at the library's glowing windows, and whispered, "You see me. You really see me." That simple acknowledgement felt like a benediction. When I reached my apartment, I placed the plaque on the bookshelf next to the first thank you notes. I arranged the sunflowers in a vase by the window. Then, before turning off the lights, I retrieved my phone. A single notification blinked, a text from Samantha. I stared at the screen. "Congratulations, Mom, you deserve it." But I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I opened my gallery and took a photo of the plaque batting sunlight. Underneath, I wrote, "Quiet tribute for the loudest kindness." And then I posted it to the community group. "Thank you, everyone, for this silent honor. Never underestimate the power of small acts." Before logging off, I added a brief question for my neighbors. What small kindness changed your story? Because after all, every revenge story isn't about vengeance. It can also be about reclaiming your worth, one gentle moment at a time. I set the phone down, turned off the lamp, and let the night wrap around me. Outside, crickets sang, and somewhere in the distance a train whistle blew. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply, feeling the quiet satisfaction of a life reclaimed. In that silence, I heard the softest applause of all, the applause of a heart finally at peace. What small kindness has given you the greatest gift? Share your story below.